Well, things are picking up around the castle, and the castle itself seems to be behaving with all of these guests coming. I wonder what it's up to. So why don't we find out more in chapter 7 of Tuesdays at the Castle by Jessica Day George. With the maids behind her, one looking smug and the other angry, Celie wound her way back through the castle to the small family dining room where Rolf and Lila had taken to barricading themselves when they needed to talk. Lila was there now, bent over a wax tablet on which she and Ma'am Housekeeper were making seating arrangements for the feast. Lila, we've brought lunch, Celia announced, and everything in the kitchen is just fine. Cook is prepared for anything. Celie sat down and nodded to the maid to put her tray down. She thought she'd be too nervous and upset to eat on the day of the memorial, even before it had become a funeral for her parents. And at breakfast, the odor of the eggs and sausage had turned her stomach and sent her scurrying from the room. But now she practically grabbed the lunch tray out of maid's hands without waiting for Lila to even look up. I'll eat in a moment, Lila said absently. You'd best eat now, Ma'am Housekeeper said. She scooped up the wax tablet. It looks well enough, Your Highness. I'll review it one last time and show Master Denning. Master Denning was the head butler. We'll make any changes we think necessary, but I don't think there will be any. Are you sure? Quite sure, Your Highness, the housekeeper said in her kind voice. She marched out, shooing the kitchen maids in front of her, and Lila sat down with a sigh. Lila lifted the lid of her tray, wrinkled her nose, and put the lid back. Celie raised her eyebrows. Lunch was an excellent cheese and cauliflower soup, with bacon and tomato sandwiches to dip in it, and bunches of enormous grapes. Lila loved cheese and cauliflower soup and grapes. You need to eat, Celie said sternly, taking a big bite of her own sandwich to encourage her sister. Yes, you do, Pogue agreed, coming into the room with Rolf. They sat down and took the lids off their trays and began to eat without any further greeting. Pogue seemed to be magically able to put half a sandwich into his mouth at once, without looking greedy or having anything fall out, and managed to wink at Celie at the same time. Rolf tore his sandwich into quarters and proceeded to dunk each quarter in soup, and then throw it in his mouth as though he were starving. We've been up since dawn, Rolf said, looking apologetic when he'd finished his sandwich and picked up his spoon. Well, so have I, Lila's voice was shrill. I've been running the entire castle, you know, getting ready for the ceremony, making sure all the guests have a place to sleep and enough food, and it just goes on and on without anyone to help me. Celie would have pointed out that she had been helping, was in fact the one who had found out there was enough food, but decided that it wasn't worth the argument. What about Celie? Pogue smiled at Celie. I'm sure she's helping. Celie glowed and smiled back, but Lila's dark expression smothered the smile. So it's just the two of us. Celie and I are expected to do everything? Lila was almost in tears. Lila, Rolf put down his spoon. Stop that at once. You know that Pogue and I have been busy. He's been talking to the captain of the guards. Rolf looked askance at Celie. You know, just in case there's any unpleasantness. You mean if the Grathians try to take over? Celie raised her eyebrows and tried to look grown up. Uh, yes, Rolf admitted. And Pogue's been directing the castle guards move from the large barracks to other quarters to accommodate the guests' men at arms. And added to that, he's also kept a watch on the roads to see who's arriving. And what have you been doing? Lila did not look at all mollified. I've been trying to keep our family in possession of this castle, Rolf said quietly, as much as anyone can be in possession of Castle Glower. Celie stopped eating. They all stared at Rolf except for Pogue, who looked uncomfortable. He put down his spoon, too, as Lila pushed her tray away. Oh, Rolf, you don't really think, but your room is still near the throne room, isn't it? Lila's voice faltered. Doesn't the castle still want you to be king? I assume so, Ralph said. My room is still as it always was, but that doesn't mean anything to Vervine or Graf. It barely means anything to Father's own council. The council? Lila's brow clouded. But they support you. They have to, or they'll end up trapped in their own rooms or spit out a chimney, and they know it. Lila, Pogue said softly, Rolf's room hasn't changed at all. I know that, Pogue, Lila snapped. Rolf just said, oh, what? What is it? Celie looked anxiously around. My room hasn't changed, Seal, Rolf repeated. It's not any bigger. It doesn't have any royal seal on the wall like Father and Mother's room does. There's no padded stand for the crown or room in the wardrobe for any robes of state. I'm still just the crown prince. Lila looked at Rolf and spoke slowly, as though not sure what to say. You're still the crown prince. That means that the castle hasn't chosen anyone else to be king, right? A burst of hope was fluttering in Celie's rib cage like a little bird. I know what it means. She bounced in her seat in excitement. I know what it means. What does it mean, Celie? Rolf turned to her, looking relieved that she might have an answer, since he apparently did not. It means that Father isn't dead, Celie blurted out. What? No, Celie. Lila reached across the table and took her hand gently. Dearest, you heard what Avery said and what the search party found. But if Father was dead, then Rolf would be the new king, Celie argued. And since Rolf is still the crown prince, then Father must still be alive. What if the castle has chosen someone else? Pogue asked suddenly. Well, there's always that chance, isn't there? He ducked his head. Sorry, Rolf, he muttered. Celie gave him a withering look. But then Rolf wouldn't be the crown prince, Celie pointed out. His room would have moved or been made smaller or something. Mother and Father's room is the same, isn't it? Lila stood up. I haven't looked, Rolf said slowly. He got up too. Now they were all on their feet, and Celie's heart was fluttering worse than before. She couldn't believe that she hadn't checked in her parents' room before. But the castle had been in mourning, hadn't it? It had draped itself in black, had refrained from making any big changes. But was that only because they were sad and scared? Did it understand death? Could it really sense what had happened to her parents leagues away? Pogue asked the same questions as they hurried along the corridors. It's a castle. I mean, how could it really understand? Don't talk like that, Celie warned. It might throw you out. Good question, though, Rolf said as they reached their parents' chambers. No one really knows, but whether or not our parents are truly dead, the castle is upset, and it's getting ready for something. Don't you think, Celie? Celie just nodded, a little out of breath from keeping up with their longer legs. The castle was getting ready for something. The memorial service or coronation, she wasn't sure. There was a kind of hum to the stones, a sense of awareness that hadn't been there before, or not quite anyway. Moment of truth, Rolf said, putting one hand on the latch of their parents' bedchamber. Please hurry, Rolf, Lila said, before one of the servants sees and thinks we've run mad with grief. Rolf opened the door and they all pushed inside. He closed it swiftly behind them and they looked around in the dimness. The fire and candles had not been lit and the curtains were drawn. Celie tried to cross the room to open them and barked her shin on a low stool. Ouch! I'll do it, Lila said, and gracefully made her way to the windows without bumping into anything and pulled the heavy curtains wide. Celie gazed around with her brother and sister and their friend. There was the bearskin rug before the hearth. There on the mantel were the ivory miniatures of all four of the royal children. The purple coverlet, their mother's embroidery frame with a half-finished design stretched across it, the carved pedestal with the scarlet cushion on top bearing the crown of state. Their father had taken a smaller circlet to wear at Bran's advancement to wizard. It's just the same, Celie whispered, and felt tears pour down her cheeks. Oh, what shall we do? Lila said, wringing her hands. What do you mean? This is glorious news. Ralph's eyes were shining, and he put an arm around Celie and gave her a tight squeeze. We have 200 guests arriving today for a funeral, Lila reminded her brother. What are we to do with them? Send them home because the castle thinks mother and father are still alive? Lila, Celie shrugged off her brother's arm, angry. Don't you believe that they're alive? I would like to think so, Lila said, her large eyes wet with unshed tears. But there's also Avery's report. She held out her right hand, showing them their mother's wedding ring on her middle finger. And I have to be practical. If they're not, Celie rushed to Lila and embraced her, and Ralph followed, wrapping his arms around both sisters. Pogue stood with his hands in his pockets, gazing out the window, and then finally spoke after a few minutes. Here's what we'll do, he said. We'll have the ceremony. It's all been planned. The guests are arriving, and they're expecting it, and we need to honor those we know for certain died in the ambush. Then, after the ceremony, I'll take some men up to the pass and look around myself, quietly. I know the land pretty well, and most of the shepherds and farmers know me. They might talk to me when they wouldn't to a soldier. I've got a better idea, Ralph said, dropping his arms and taking up a thoughtful pose by the fireplace. What if you went through the pass and beyond? Where? Pogue and Lila asked at the same time. Pogue winked at her and Lila flushed. To the College of Wizardry, Ralph said excitedly. I can't believe we didn't think of this before. There must be something they can do to verify who died or search for any survivors with magic. They must know how to track Bran, Celie said, clutching at the neck of her gown to try to contain her racing heart. He was there for 3 years. Perhaps they could look for him in a crystal ball or something. Oh, Pogue, would you? Lila reached out a beseeching hand to him. He took it and kissed it, his old flirtatious ways surfacing. For you, anything. Celie and Ralph rolled their eyes, but they were grinning broadly.